Go. First and foremost, welcome all to the University of Central Florida's third annual Open Ed Live. So thrilled that you are here to join. There are close to 500 of you that have registered for this event. We have 35 states represented. We have three countries: Canada, Morocco, Iraq, that at least I saw. So I do want to take a moment and just recognize that we had a new partnership this year. We not only shared cross promotion with OER Arizona, but we're also sharing the keynote speaker with Lisa. Different presentations. She's going to be stellar. So just bear with us for a second. I want to talk a little bit about the day, we have sessions for the next 3 days. We have a noon Eastern time, we have a 1 o'clock drop in, and then we have a 2 o'clock featured one each day. So we hope that you can join us as your schedule allows for. But let's get to the heart of it. And as I saw somebody else in the chat said, they're here for Lisa. So get off the stage, Kevin. I got it. So I want to share just a little bit of an anecdote. I first met Lisa, I want to say it was 9 years ago at an Open Ed event in Anaheim, California. We started having a conversation, and I quickly found that she was a native New Englander like myself. And like all New Englanders, our conversation ended up talking about Duncan. No lie, it just happens. But at that point in time, when I started to get to know Lisa, I had known about her from her reputation and the Maricopa Millions project that she had been running. But at that same time, the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman movie had just come out, and Lisa was sporting these beautiful bracelets that she had gotten from a family member. And I just noted that. And as years have gone by, and I've gotten to work with Lisa on different projects, whether it was through regional leaders in open education or CCC OER, I've just seen that she has truly lived up to that moniker of wonder. And just to show how wonderful of a person she is, she's actually sharing her birthday today with us. So with that, if you could please join me in welcoming Lisa and wishing her a happy birthday, Dr. Lisa Young.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. Let me just get the screen together. And thank you all so much. Oh my gosh, there's so much celebration on the screen. Thank you. Okay, is this working, Rebecca and Kevin?
We don't see the share quite yet.
You don't. This worked a minute ago.
Oh,
Not
well,
yet? Okay, we'll try it again.
perfect.
You can
We
see
see
it?
your full screen this time. So not quite the presenter. There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right. And first, I need to just let you all know that I woke up with a little sniffle today. And if I just suddenly disappear, it's just because my nose needs to be blown or I'm coughing. So I apologize for that, if that is the case. But I'm so excited to be here with you. Kevin, thank you so much. I remember meeting you as well and that amazing conference and becoming friends at that point. So I am really grateful for our friendship and all that I've learned from you as well. And today we're going to talk about opening doors and building bridges. Specifically, what we're going to talk about, and I'm so sorry, I have you all blocking my screen here, so I'm going to just put you all there. Our agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about open education. Some of you may be new to open education, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. But one of the things we've done with open education is we've seen it as an initiative. We've seen open education as a movement. But another way that we can really view open education is as a tool for so many of the other things that we're doing in higher education. And I'm going to give you an example of how we can do that with microcredentials. So I'm going to talk to you about microcredentials. I'm going to share some frameworks that I've developed. Talk about the importance for workforce partnerships as we look at open microcredentials, and then discuss some future directions. One of the things you're not going to hear much about, and I know you're going to be surprised, is AI. I use AI. I think it's fantastic. I think there's a lot of opportunity for open education and AI, but that's not this talk. That's a lot of other great, fantastic talks. And I think last year you had David Wiley, who is doing some great work in that respect. So to start, and I had no idea what Kevin was going to say, and I had no idea that we were going to talk about kind of what those superpowers are. But we are all champions. We are all heroes in the work we do with open education. And I wanted to share with you my open origin story. And so I'm going to share my story, but I'd also love for you to share your open origin story in the chat, or if you're using Threads or X or what have you, go ahead and put that hashtag on it and share it with the world. Let's bring some attention to this awesome open education work that we are doing. So I just retired after 32 years with the Maricopa Community Colleges. I retired in October, and I'm really busy doing really fun stuff. Post work being a faculty member, I was a faculty member for 32 years. I started teaching hydrology. You see my little calendar girl moment, and I taught hydrology for 15 years. When I started, it was the old days. Some of you might remember this. Some of you might be looking at this piece of equipment thinking, I don't know what this is. Well, it's an overhead projector. They used to use them in bowling alleys and classrooms. Yes, that's true. And what you did was you had pieces of plastic, like little sheets of plastic, and you had dry erase markers that we use like on whiteboards now. And we would actually write our notes on them, overlay them on this, turn on the light bulb, and it would project on the wall. So when I started teaching, I had legal pads with my notes, and then I would just transcribe them live. I know it was riveting for my students onto these little pieces of plastic so that they could see them. And so for every class, I had my notes on yellow lined paper, and then I had all of these transparencies that then I could reuse because I was still reusing my work back then. And I had that for every lecture that I did. And in 1997, I was one of two faculty members to start teaching online. We started using a program called Web Course in a Box, and that was before Blackboard. And then I shifted. I had an instructional need because my students were water treatment plant operators, and they worked 3 days on, 4 days off, 4 days on, 3 days off, and their shift changed every month. So imagine trying to schedule a class for people who are working in those environments. So I put my program online. And then we moved to Blackboard. But Blackboard wasn't like, Blackboard and Canvas and how it is now. There was no cloud necessarily. There was a cloud, there was the internet, but we didn't have all these cloud services. And so all of the content was on servers, usually under people's desk, and they were really just CPUs and like desktop computers under someone's desk. So they weren't really desk under computers, and that housed all your content. And that's where we ran, with a hard line into the internet to get to people. And then they used the dial up to access it. And that worked out great. And so a few years in, it's the turn of the century, really. My president of the college comes into my office and he's like, oh my gosh, Lisa, your office is a fire hazard. You have all of these folders everywhere and you've got these pieces of plastic, and what's going on here? You got to clean this up. So I was like, well, all my stuff's online. And so I threw away all of my notes for all the classes that I had taught for nearly 10 years. And back then, as I said, there was no cloud storage. So our internet wizard, she left the college, and no one in IT really realized what she was doing to support online learning. So they wiped her computer and wiped all of our content. And the classes that I was teaching, I had, but anything that I had taught in prior semesters, I lost. And I had 8 weeks where, until my class was starting, that I no longer had content for. I didn't have those transparencies. I didn't have those notes. So I was doing work with reusable learning objects, and I searched the web. And while there was no open education back then, there was no open licensing back then, there were reusable learning objects. And I pulled an entire course together, taking things from K-12, taking things from graduate programs, pulled it all together. And that was like my open origin story. So I wanted to share that with you. I really want to hear yours. Please put them in the chat. Please post them. Let's gain some traction on this. So, as we talk about opening doors and building bridges, we're really looking, I wanted to first touch on the evolution of open education from access to recognition. And there are actually three people in this photo. I don't know if you can see this person here, but I thought it was really cool. All of these images have an Unsplash open license. And so let's start out with a brief history of open education. And so learning objects were initially coined in 1994 by Wayne Hodgins, and that was my first step into open education. These learning objects, these little objects of content that we were able to share. People just put them out there and we decided we wanted to share. And then 4 years later, David Wiley came up with the term open content, which started moving things along. Back in 2001, Creative Commons was founded, and that allowed for the development of Creative Commons licensing, the magic that happens with our OER to openly license it. 2002, things were happening on the global stage. I know we have a number of people attending from a number of different countries. UNESCO coined the term open educational resources back in 2002. And then also in 2002, MIT launched their open courseware. Now in 2007, David Wiley came up with the 4 R's of open content, and that really changed things. I see the 4 R's as the magic of open education. Now, moving on, in 2008, Cape Town, Africa, was the Cape Town Open Education Declaration. From 2011 to 2014, the US Department of Labor introduced tax grants. I cannot tell you what all those T's, A's, and C's like spell out, but they were from the Department of Labor, and they were really aligned with the CTE, Career and Technical Ed, and they required that all of the materials created with the tax grants had open licenses. That was huge. That was game changing for us in this open education community. In 2012, on the global stage, UNESCO had the Paris OER Declaration. Now, David Wiley, who is such a great scholar, who is such a great open education advocate, amended the 4 R's to the 5 R's, being able to retain those open education materials, those Creative Commons licensed materials, and that happened in 2014. Now, from 2018 to present, some other things have happened. The Open Textbook Pilot program through the Affordable College Textbook Act created funding and legislation for moving open education. In 2019, UNESCO created their recommendation on OER. And in 2024, at the Paris Declaration on the Equality of Recognitions, came the Open Recognition Manifesto. And so the work that you all have been doing and the work that I'm going to be proposing that we do in the future is really grounded in this timeline of over 25 years, almost 30 years. So this Open Recognition Manifesto, this term open recognition may be new to you. So I wanted to just provide a definition. It's the open, shared practice of acknowledging learning, skills, and contributions across formal, informal, and community contexts. Now, I see this as a part of the larger open umbrella. We have open source, we have open education, we have open recognition. And what we're going to talk about a bit today combines open education and open recognition. So I mentioned the 5 R's of open education, and this is the magic of open education. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but I'm going to very quickly tell you about how I have leveraged the 5 R's. So I mentioned that I taught hydrology. Within hydrology, I also taught geographic information systems and sustainability, some geography. And when I started teaching a new geographic information technology class, the first thing I did was I reached out to my colleague, Adam Dastrup at Salt Lake Community College. Again, when I mentioned my superpower, it's connecting people within the open education community. And I reached out to Adam because I knew that he had developed geographic information systems, I'm going to call it GIS, materials through that TACT grant that I spoke about earlier. And I said, hey, Adam, where are your materials? I know they're openly licensed. I would like to use them. And he said, hey, Lisa, they're on Pressbooks. I was like, yay. So I cloned his book. And so I was reusing his book. However, when I looked at my competencies and I looked at his book, there were some areas that were missing. There were gaps. And some areas that I wasn't quite going that deep in. So I pulled some materials out. I revised it. I also went through, made some edits, added some examples that I wanted to provide that were aligned with the contextualization I wanted to give it. Also, for some of those gaps, not only did I author some of my own content, there was another professor who had developed some open content. So I remixed, I threw in some of those chapters. And then again, I continued to edit to make sure that they had as close to one voice as I could do. And then I put my version out on Pressbooks so others could use my version. Of course, attributing Adam and all of the others that I brought in through my remixing. And now I can make own and control copies of the content. So can my students. And so I love how these 5 R's work. So that was like the brief history of open education for you. So now I'm going to go into understanding micro-credentials and their role in lifelong learning. And so with this, there's going to be some new terminology that you may not be familiar with. And so the first thing is an LER, a learning and employment record. And I've given you 2 definitions here. The first one is a simple definition. It's a digital record that documents a person's skills, credentials, and experiences from education, work, and other learning over time. So things like our transcripts, things like badges that we get, things like certificates, and also on the employment side and your employment history, where you worked, and these are verifiable. So they allow for these to be very easily verified, which is really important, especially in this world that we're living in with AI and so many things being able to be created so easily. So a type of LER is a micro-credential is one type of LER. As I mentioned, there's transcripts, there's all sorts of things. A micro-credential is a credential that validates, verifies, and attests to the achievement or mastery of one or more specific skills, competencies, or defined area of knowledge. They often require evidence to demonstrate competence. So when I think about micro-credentials, I think that it's content, and when you earn the micro-credential, it is verifying mastery of a skill at a specific proficiency level. And sometimes those proficiency levels are even greater than passing a class. So a lot of micro-credentials, a class might be 70 or higher is considered passing. However, a micro-credential might have an 85 or a 90% proficiency level. And so that's really important. And it's demonstrating the skill, mastery of that skill. And then you go into micro-credential pathways. And micro-credential pathway is basically 2 or more micro-credentials put together that are employer validated. So these are things that are student-centered and industry driven. And they have an off-ramp to a livable wage and an on-ramp to stackable credentials. So they get something in a short term, anywhere from 2 weeks to a year. And that gives that student the opportunity to earn that livable wage and also to continue on to a certificate of completion, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. All of so the idea is it gets them in and then they can level up. So my next question for you is, have you earned a micro-credential? If so, tell us about it in the chat. I'd love for you all to learn from each other about how you've earned micro-credentials. I've earned several micro-credentials. My first micro-credential was actually AI in the classroom. My second micro-credential was a series I became. The One Ed Tech is an organization that has a Trusted Learner Apps certificate, and I earned the leader micro-credential. So I earned 5 micro-credentials in that pathway. So that was very exciting for me, and that gave me skills in a number of different areas, including accessibility, understanding the LER ecosystem, understanding their standards-based certifications that they do, and the tools that they have. So please jump in the chat. Tell us. I see some items coming in and some LinkedIn micro credentials. A lot with LinkedIn, I see. And a badge is, in fact, a visual representation of the micro credential, and we'll be talking about that in just a second. So, what does a micro credential and a micro credential pathway look like? Let's make it real for you. So I got permission from the Maricopa Community Colleges to share Chandler Gilbert Community College's data analytics micro-credential pathway. Um, this is like such a cool micro-credential pathway. It's 28 weeks, it's a non-credit, and it's hybrid. So there is some asynchronous work, some synchronous work. There are a number of top skills you'll see here that are represented. Um, that the students are going to master in this micro-credential pathway. And so students are able to earn, and these are what the open digital badges look like. And they earn 7 different badges by completing the data wrangling micro-credential, the SQL micro-credential, data visualization micro-credential, Excel, Python micro-credentials, and then micro-credentials in critical thinking and creative problem solving. When they've earned all 7 of these micro-credentials in this 28-week long period, they are then issued and they've earned the data analytics micro-credential pathway. And so they are issued this open digital badge as well. And as I mentioned, these are student-centered and industry-driven, so they've been validated by a number of regional employers. And I mentioned that off-ramp to a livable wage and an on-ramp to additional stackable credentials. So the students who complete this can continue, they start as a junior operations research analyst at $48,000 a year. They can then get their data analytics AAS while they're working and level up. They can then become an operations research analyst. They can get their bachelor's, so on and so forth. So this is what a micro-credential pathway looks like. So I want to stop for just a second and see if there are any specific questions about what a micro-credential is, what a micro-credential pathway is. These lead into the LERs, the Learning and Employment Records, and that the open digital badge is a digital representation of their earning the micro-credential. So just want to see if there's any questions there specific to that. I don't see any coming in, and I don't see any ellipses saying people are writing, so I'm going to continue.
There were a couple in the chat,
Oh,
one
okay.
specifically asking the difference between badges and micro-credentials, and then another question about where people typically put it on their CV.
Okay, great questions. So the badge is a digital representation of the micro-credential. So the micro-credential is what they're learning and what they've earned, just like a diploma is a representation of the degree. So that's how I would relate it to you, for you. And there's a number of things that you should be doing with your micro-credentials as you earn them. So you can have, in LinkedIn specifically, there's an area for certifications, and you can put them in that area on LinkedIn. Also, as you master the skills of those micro-credentials, you can add those skills to your LinkedIn. There's a skills section as well. You can also put them into a digital wallet or pocket or backpack, depending on what tools you're using. Some of your LMSs have those. So you can put that there, and that's the repository like for all your LERs. And the third thing that you can do with them is have a list on your specific CV or resume where you have certifications or micro-credentials spelled out. Any other questions come in there?
One just asking, can people put this under their email signatures?
Under their
Email signatures?
Absolutely. Many people will do that. So if that's something that you'd like to do, you certainly can do that. You can add the image of the micro-credential. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the image of the badge, I'm sorry. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about the badge and why it's so important to put them into a wallet, pocket, or backpack in just a minute. All right. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the ecosystem, and then I'm going to dive deeper into that open digital badge. And so this is like how of the flow of what we call the LER ecosystem. And so people issue the micro credentials, and the students earn the micro-credential and the open digital badge and get awarded the open digital badge. They get awarded through this LER issuing technology, which are the open badge issuing platforms. And then they are able to curate them within resume builders, credential management pockets, backpacks, wallets. And then they're able to be leveraged in a number of different areas like HR systems, job boards, LER talent marketplaces. There's some of those out there. And they can be leveraged in regard to background screening and pathway and career planning. And so there's a lot of it's not new. It's been out like since 2014, but 2013, 2014, but there's a lot of movement in this now, and we're going to see a lot of things changing in the LAR ecosystem in regard to we're going to end up more familiar with it. So why micro credentials now? Just kind of talking to that, like why now? We've seen in articles that consumer confidence with some of the degrees that we're providing is low with college and in higher ed in general. We're seeing employers shifting from degree first to skills first. Many states no longer require degrees for a lot of the positions within the state government. We're seeing job roles changing much faster than we can adapt as academia. So having these shorter, flexible pathways not only allow us to be more nimble and flexible in regard to our processes, they also fit really well for our learners in regard to their work and life. Many of our students need, because careers are disappearing, the jobs that they were in are disappearing very quickly right now because of the labor market and some of the new technologies that are going on. They need to be able to find something quickly so they can get into the workforce. We're also seeing students using a number of different ways to learn and earn those skills: formal, informal, and experiential learning. And so, I know that I wanted to learn more about project management. I jumped on Coursera and gained some informal skills. A lot of the students that I see really succeeding are doing work in experiential learning. They're getting internships and cooperative education opportunities. We're also seeing that lifelong learning is no longer optional. We need to level up for economic mobility as a society. And we've heard from a lot of our students that they want to make their learning more visible. And so by earning micro-credentials, it distinguishes them in their job search. Also, these are very portable, and over time they'll be trusted because they're verifiable through machine learning. And so there's a lot of ways that this is more trusted, and the students can choose who to share it with, when to share it with, and how to share it with. And so they have more agency over their micro credentials. If I want to share my transcript, I have to go and pay for it with the universities that I attended. I have to pay them. If I had like a hold, I have to make that whole before I can release my transcript. So I don't own it. The universities own it. And then I don't even get to see it. It just goes straight to whomever I'm asking it to be sent to. This way, students can really interact with their skills and their credentials to determine what they share. And so this also gives us a shared language of skills. There are databases and taxonomies of skills that we can leverage in these micro-credentials for everyone to understand what skills were mastered. So I'd like to just touch on the micro-credential value framework that I have put together. And so I think of our 5 R's as the values that we have for open education. And so when I think about the micro-credential value framework, I see it as learner-centered, and I see all of these items around the learner as values of micro-credentials. Access, Assessment. Assessment is critical. Assessment is such an important place in this because that's what makes the micro-credential have value to industry and employers. It adds the integrity of the micro-credential and demonstrates that the student has mastered the micro-credential at that proficiency level. The duration of the micro-credentials is also critical in terms that it could be 2 weeks, it could be a year, or anything in between. Employer and industry engagement and collaboration and coordination are critical. We need them to be quality-based, which we have the same conversations in open education, to be skills-based, be relevant for industry and for the learner, to be stackable into additional credentials, to have clarity and transparency, as I just discussed about the difference between a transcript today as not a part of the LER. And they need to be shareable. Both the micro-credential, the open digital badge, and the micro-credential and knowledge and content. So micro-credentials are more than short learning experiences. They're intentional, they're values-based pathways that make learning visible, verifiable, and valued. As we continue this thought, what I've done is I have overlaid the 5 R's with that micro-credential framework. And I just have to give props to Jonathan Deere and Samreen Designs. Jonathan Deere, for these images, he had the initial concept for the artwork, and then Fiverr is a super cool tool. I hired Samreen Designs she is an amazing graphic designer from Pakistan who was able to pull these images into what they are today. So I just wanted to make sure that I attributed their work. And when we look at this, we can see that there are areas that overlap. So in terms of reusing and revising, duration is really critical in that the duration can be reused and it can be revised. When we look at revising and remixing, we can look at keeping content skills-based and being able to revise it and remix it. You can see that when we look at remixing and retaining, having the micro-credentials and their content stackable allows us to be able to reuse that content. And when we look at redistributing, we're looking at them being shareable and having access, but that also aligns with our reuse. And so there's a lot of different reasons why we might want to revise content. I'm coming back to our little pink area for that employer and industry engagement and quality. So I'm proposing that we have open micro-credentials, that we leverage open content for our micro-credential work. But with that, there are some things that we have to keep in mind to ensure the integrity of the micro-credential, that the content doesn't misalign. Assessment's really tough within this world because that assessment, industry are expecting students to have specific skills at that proficiency level. And should assessment be open or should it be closed? There's a lot of areas here that we have to work on as an open community to see how we can leverage open education as a tool for micro-credentials, which is happening at a very large rate and scaling at many of our institutions. So I mentioned that we were going to go back and talk a little bit about open digital badges. And open digital badges this isn't open in our sense. This is open as in open source. And an open micro-credential has that content, it has the micro-credential, and then it has an open digital badge. And they're machine readable. And once the magic behind an open digital badge is the metadata, the data and information inside. And so that has the alignment, it has the criteria for earning the badge, it has a description, it has the badge name, it has a digital signature verifying that the student earned it, all within that machine readable content. It can have the evidence, expiration dates, issuing dates, the issuer, who the recipient is, and the verification. So this is the magic behind the open digital badge that makes it so useful and verifiable and part of that LER I mentioned. So, one of the really key aspects of this work is partnering with the workforce and workforce development when we look at developing the micro-credentials, the micro-credential content, identifying what skills are important to the industry and the community. So, I wanted to show you an example of a micro-credential pathway that was developed that is being developed with industry, and just show you what an open micro-credential might look like. So this is Maricopa's Financial Investment Essentials micro-credential pathway, and this has closed micro-credentials and open micro-credentials. So what we found from industry is that the finance industry has a requirement of something called the SIE, and this is a base level certification for compliance with the federal government for anyone who sells financial instruments. And so banks, insurance companies, they all need this in order to have their people be able to work in this area. Scottsdale Community College has a course and a certification for securities industry for this SIE require certification. So they prepare the student for the SIE exam. They have content that is a requirement. They have a learning lab that helps them with test taking procedures and more content. And that was preparing the students for that SIE exam. What we found was that when the students came in with that certification, and so that micro-credential is closed because it's specifically they take it with FINRA. FINRA is the compliance organization that issues the certification. But we found that the students needed additional skills, customer service and sales skills, to be really successful in the role. And so we are developing a financial service and sales skills, durable skill, 21st century skills, micro-credential that will be openly licensed. Bank of America is our sponsor for this work, and they are helping us pull together members of the banking industry from multiple employers and industry representatives to identify the skills that are most needed, to prioritize and validate those skills. And then we will be offering an open micro-credential. We'll be sharing this across the world, well, really North America, because SIE is a specific US-based compliance. But we'll be sharing this so other colleges can offer this micro-credential pathway, so the finance industry will all know what's included in financial investment essentials. And again, you can see the off-ramp to a livable wage. You can see the on-ramp to stackable credentials. And we're anticipating that 30,000 jobs are going to be available in this area in the next 5 to 7 years nationwide. And so this is directly meeting industry needs. So in regard to partnering with workforce development, they need to be involved in the co-creation, skills prioritization, including expert voices, ensuring that everything is relevant. And we, as open education practitioners, as open education champions, as open education heroes, we have the opportunity to map OER and open content to workforce skills frameworks that are already out there. We have the opportunity to work closely with our workforce development areas that might be doing this work on micro-credentials so that we don't have closed, but we have open micro-credentials. One of the biggest challenges I've had with these closed micro-credentials is that we're not able to modify them, to contextualize them, or even to change their duration. And I found that when we look at the service and sales skills, as I mentioned just a moment ago, not only can this be offered as is, how it can also be integrated, this service and sales skills can be integrated into finance courses. And students could have that durable skill that's recognized by the banking industry. But we can't do that if it's closed. We can only do that if it's openly licensed so that we can really integrate it into those courses. We also have the opportunity to communicate value using language of skills and outcomes. And so this is a shift that we can make as open education practitioners to think about this as we're developing new open education content. not just competencies, but really looking at the specific skills that the students are mastering. So there are a lot of promises and yet some challenges of moving into open micro-credentials. So advantages, I'm sure you can imagine many of these. Equity and visibility for learners, lower barriers, increased transparency in regard to accessing the access of the content, but also for industry to be able to go in and see what that content is if it's openly licensed. The scalability and the cost effectiveness allows for leveraging open content, changes the game. We know this. We speak this all of the time. Um, Forgive me, I do have to blow my nose. I'm so sorry, everybody. Hang on just a second. I'm back. So also being able to reuse and reduce using it, being able to reuse content allows us to reduce those institutional costs. We're able to set very clear expectations for employers, and we're able to scale the content nationwide if we want, institution-wide, statewide, or we're able to, as we look at specific industry needs, but also we're able to leverage those 5 Rs as the faculty who may be using them to adapt them for our use to ensure that we can be inclusive for our students, that they can be contextualized for our needs. But there are potentially a lot of challenges with this as well, and we need to really look at the quality assurance, not the quality of the content. We nail that in the open education world, but the quality assurance and academic integrity and interoperability of that content and micro-credentials so that any student who earns the micro-credential can demonstrate mastery of those skills. We have to really think about what reuse means in this open education community and how it's communicated. We have to look at policy, institutional readiness. There's a whole governance to all of this LER work that has to be established. And then when we throw open in there, we now need to make sure that we're doing that work. So if you have governance work happening with microcredentials, definitely start talking about how open education is in there as well. Building employer awareness and trust is critical. And then there's the potential for mixing open and closed content. That's going to be important because, as I mentioned earlier, the assessment may not be able to be open and may need to be closed to ensure the integrity of that micro-credential. So the next frontier, open ecosystems where learnings, skills, and work connect seamlessly. Wouldn't that be amazing? And also the role of AI, analytics, and open data in advancing lifelong learning. That's a whole nother talk. That's more work for us in the future. But this will really allow us to build the bridges that keep lifelong learning open and lifelong and allow us to really leverage open education as a tool for some of these bigger challenges and bigger initiatives and work that's being done at our institutions. There's been contact information. Also, I have a whole bunch of references, so do feel free to explore those. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and open for questions.
Had a wide variety of conversations in the chat, which is fabulous, and we'll make sure to get that to you because there's no way you could have possibly been paying that close. So some questions from those conversations. What are some low-cost platforms for badging and micro-credentials?
That's a great question. I'm actually doing some of that research right now. If you ask me in 1 month, I will have a full crosswalk of all of them. I would say if you have something that's already being used, you may already have something being used at your institution. So that's the first thing. Find out if you have something. Something might be being used in a different department. And so check with your IT departments or your procurement departments to see if anything's in use. I often find that an institution will have 2 or 3 platforms. And so also look at some of the open source platforms. So now, open source is absolutely fantastic, but you have to have the hardware and the humans to be able to install it at the institution. So definitely check that out. Also, please feel free to email me if you want access to some of my crosswalk when I finish it in about a month. And so I'm happy to share that so that you will have detail on what the features are, what features are available, what the costs are, all of those things.
Thank you. Another question, how do we encourage students to benefit from microcredentials so that they can see those benefits in their fields?
That's something that we have a lot of work to do because I can tell you that it's not that easy to claim your micro credentials. It's confusing. There's so many different platforms right now. I was just at a conference in Philadelphia and they were talking about how it's the Wild West, and I live in the Wild West, and it is the Wild West with some of this, and so it can be very confusing to the students. So as people working with our students, educating them on what this means, but also as faculty, for those faculty out there or instructional designers out there, building in opportunities for metacognition, for reflection of the skills being mastered, what skills they are actually mastering, how that mastery fits with what they've learned already in that context, as well as their goals and how those skills will really help them to meet their goals, make their dreams come true, so that they can speak about it in interviews.
Wonderful, thank you. We're coming up, I think we've time to one more question.
If I can jump in, Lisa, I'm dying to ask this question. So as we are focusing on micro learning across the board, how should the OER community talk to the folks who are building OER to shift their focus so that we're not focused so much on a textbook format anymore, and that we're better aligned to where we need to be for this skills competency-based testing?
I think that the first thing we need to do is really bring an awareness, just like we did with open education back in the day. We brought an awareness of what Creative Commons licenses were and what open education was and what it means to our students. We need to have those same conversations about what moving to this skills-based learning and what open digital badges and what the metadata behind it mean, so that we can kind of start with that shared understanding, and then start thinking about how can we communicate that information to the students within our courses, and then team up with the micro credentials, those that are doing the micro credential work, to ensure that some of the materials are openly licensed.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say, before I hand it back to Rebecca, I so much appreciate that you took the time to join us today and give us, foundational knowledge on micro-credentials and how we should be rethinking about open and spending this day, your birthday, with us. So with that, I'll say thank you and hand it back to Rebecca.
Thank you all so much. I had a blast. Please feel free to email me with questions or thoughts. I love, chatting with people about this stuff.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was wonderful. I've got a whole sheet of notes on me. So we'll keep curating those questions, loop back into it, and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you. We've got another 2 more sessions for the day. We're going to take a quick break. Then if you pop back into Sched, you'll see the link to a drop-in session with Kevin Corcoran, which will just be an Ask Me Anything, beginner to expert, have a conversation about any question that you might have in mind. Then we're going to close up at 2 o'clock Eastern time, so you guys can all do the math because I don't want to, with a question on valuing open work with Andy McKinney. This is such a wonderful foundation to the rest of the day and the rest of the conference. Thank you so much, Lisa. All right, we'll see everyone back in about 13 minutes. Looking forward to it.